having an impact on people's life is important to me. And I want to be able to do that. The next phase of our life is going to be different. It's not about having a hit. It's not about getting a Grammy. It's about making a difference. I'm finding ways that I can plug in and do things for people. And I just want to give back. I want to be able to help anyone that I can and create something that is bigger than anything that I could ever imagine.
You are listening to the Christian Music Archive podcast, part of the New Release Today podcast network. I'm your host, Dave Maurer. Each week, I share stories about Christ, community, and music, chatting with musical guests who you will find listed on the pages of the Christian Music Archive. There are thousands of creative men and women who have helped shape the soundtrack of the Christian faith, and we get to hear their stories, learn about how Christ has made a difference in their life, and hopefully along the way, we'll learn how we can be a better part of our community. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, my friend. Today is a fun conversation with a man who you may have never heard of, but I almost guarantee that you've heard his work. He has worked as a songwriter and producer with the likes of Ronnie Milsap, Amy Grant, Steve Camp, BeBe and CeCe Winans, Vanessa Williams. Well, you get the idea. Keith Thomas has invested a lot of time and energy in helping people be the best versions of themselves, and he's been quite successful at it. As I've recently explored what it means to live in community, I've been struck by the number of folks who talk about investing in other people. That might be as a vocal coach or a producer, it might be as a mentor or an encourager. However you color it, taking an active role in people around us is part of what draws us together and makes us a better community. So today, we're going to hear stories from Keith about how he has benefited from people investing in him. We're also going to hear how, now that he's investing in others, what that looks like, and I think you're really going to enjoy this exchange. According to the World Health Organization, over 750 million people do not have access to clean water. In South Asia, where Mercy Inc. is working, the water that is available is contaminated with arsenic, making it a poisonous concoction that causes people to get sick and sometimes die. So Mercy Inc. and their partners are drilling deep wells to make sure that there's safe, clean water available to the community. Many of these wells are installed in mostly Muslim villages. The wells are painted blue and have the name Jesus Wells emblazoned on them, and they really stand out. As the wells are installed and maintained, the message of Jesus is being shared, and people are learning about the living water of Christ as they receive the clean water that they need for life, health, and safety. According to Mercy Inc.'s statistics, nearly 300 people make a personal decision for Christ at each of these wells. Would you like to learn more about the Jesus Wells Project? Head over to christianmusicarchive.com/mercy, and you can help provide living water in addition to clean, safe drinking water. Well, every week I open our podcast conversation by saying that we're talking with the people who are listed on the pages of the Christian Music Archive. Most of the time, that means I'm talking to a singer or a performer, but today we're going to jump into the control room and chat with Keith Thomas. Keith has production and songwriting credits on so many albums, I couldn't list them all here in an hour. Artists like BeBe and CeCe Winans, Amy Grant, Kathy Troccoli, as well as mainstream artists like Vanessa Williams, 98 Degrees, Jessica Simpson, and tons more. This is going to be a lot of fun looking behind the scenes in music. So join me in welcoming to the podcast, Keith Thomas. Welcome, Keith.
Woo! Thank you, buddy.
Yeah.
So good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. You know, your production credit list, I was perusing before. I mean, that is a huge list. You've got songwriting, arrangements, keyboards. When you're in an elevator and you're introducing yourself to somebody, what do you say you do?
I try to hide. I don't really do that. I don't have an elevator pitch. That's funny. No, look, I just, I've been blessed. Are you kidding? I say that honestly. I've been blessed. I've been in a lot of good places at the right time. But, I've worked hard over the years, too. My dad was a hillbilly musician that wanted somebody in the family to finally move to Nashville and make it. And not that I've made it, but I'm still hunting it. But that was the thing, I'm living his dream.
Oh,
and,
fun.
and that feels really good.
Well, do you have a favorite role of all of those hats that you wear? I noticed you have a tall hat rack in the back with about 57 hats on it. So,
That's funny. Well, look, I love, I love taking a new artist and finding out what makes them tick and how to make the most of that, how to get the most out of them.
yeah.
I over the years, I've gotten known, I guess, or more known in the circles of like vocal coaching. That's
Okay.
kind of one of my specialties, I think. And, I just love that because, look, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to move to New York. I had an opportunity to go to New York and act. And my dad was a primitive Baptist preacher, and he went to one of the rehearsals with me, and he said, "No, you're not going to New York." And so, so here I am doing music. But what I did learn, through all of that was at least how to tap into that creative side. And I still use some of that stuff that I learned back then in the music side.
Well, you talked about, and I want to get to the little bit about your growing up years eventually, but really what I read somewhere is that you were discovered by Ronnie Milsap. Is that true?
Well, I'll tell you the story. That is true. And you know what? It's so funny how life just kind of circles back around. I've recently reconnected with him and Rob Galbraith, the person that signed me. But yeah, I was on the road with a group called the Sherritt Brothers for a while.
Okay.
And they were on Word Records.
Yeah.
And when I got off, I had started to write then. So I'd written 2 songs that I thought sounded like Ronnie. And Ronnie was playing in Atlanta at one of the venues there. And look, this would never happen today. But I actually called the venue where he was playing, and I spoke to his brother-in-law. And he says, "Yeah, just send your songs to Rob Galbraith in Nashville." And sure enough, I did a little demo on my roads and sent them up there.
Oh, no
Totally
kidding.
I forgot about it. And then about 3 months later, I get a call from Rob, and I'd signed it Brian Keith Thomas.
Okay.
And he said, "Hey, Brian, this is Rob Galbraith from Ronnie Milsap." He said, I threw your songs, I threw your cassette in the trash, but something made me get it out, and I love these songs. Would you come to Nashville? And so that weekend, I drove to Nashville, did the demos, and while I was in Nashville, they said, "We're starting a publishing company. Would you be our first staff writer?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so that's what moved me to Nashville.
No, and it was all just on this hunch that you threw a cassette or called the venue.
I called the venue and spoke to his brother-in-law. That's, And so fast forward all these years, I managed Layla Tucker, Tanya Tucker's daughter. And so I was doing an interview with her early on. This is about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And, I was just kind of getting ideas about, who her inspiration was, who her, people that she had grown up listening to. And she said, "Well, my idol is Ronnie Milsap. I'm in love with Ronnie Milsap." I said, "Well, you don't know my story, do you?" And she said, "No." And so I began to tell her about that, and she freaked out. So quietly, I reconnected with Ronnie, put together an introduction so that she went over to his house and met him and that sort of thing. So that was such a great
that's fun.
to be able to do that. Yeah, that was so much fun.
Well, you landed in Nashville then to help Ronnie and their production company, but then you eventually went to Word Records, right? And you signed with Word as a staff writer, was it?
Well, yeah, I signed as a staff writer and producer about a year and a half after I left Ronnie, or was with Ronnie.
Okay.
But yeah, I was at Word for about 7 years, I guess it was. And, we had a lot of success there. We that's kind of where I say I learned to produce at Ronnie's studio because Ronnie gave me his studio when he was on the road. So I would sit in there for hours on end, learning to produce. But when I went to Word, I was like, I remember Neil Joseph coming to me saying, "I've got this new artist. We're not sure. He's on his 3rd record. We're not sure if he's going to be around, on this next album, but we'd love for you to do this record." It was Steve Camp.
Oh, just some nobody.
Yeah, I know, right? Of Steve Camp, holy crow! And so we did the what was the name of that song? "Run to the Battle."
Oh yeah.
That's a long time ago. Anyway, so that was 6 months, number one, and I was like, "Holy crow! I can do this," And so that started that whole thing with me, and then it came Kenny Marks, and then I started working with Amy and a lot of different other artists that like I said, I've been blessed. I was right in the middle of that time when Word had a big run, and I'm glad to be a part of that.
So were your solo instrumental albums, was that in that same time period?
It was. Well, when I got to Word, Neil said, "Hey, we have some extra studio time left over down at Goldmine Studios. You want to go down and play?" So I did. I took my some of my musician friends down, and we just, I'd written some songs,
Yeah.
and so we went down and cut the album. I think we spent maybe total $5,000 on the whole project.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and and look, it didn't sell like I had hoped it would,
Sure.
but it did turn a few heads at the time. And you know what? I still get requests for those projects. I'm really grateful for those. And we had so much fun doing it, though. It was just something different at the time. And
Yeah.
Jazz and Christian music.
Who else was doing it? Koinonia was about the only other group that was doing that, right?
Yeah, Fletch Wiley was doing some stuff
Fletch.
as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I never forget the first time I walked into my Christian bookstore. I had a real good relationship with the Christian bookstore owner, and he was always pitching me stuff and saying, "Hey, this is new. Check this out." And he tossed me Instrumental Appetite, and
wow.
I loved the artwork. It was just crazy. And then you flip it over. So for the listener, the cover is a plate that has like a cake that's got keyboard on it, and Keith plays keyboard. Well, you go to the back, and the cake is half eaten.
Right. Well, you know what? That's the only thing that won an award is the cover.
Well, I don't know why. The music is great. I love the music.
I've listened to it not too long ago, and it still holds up for what it is.
Yeah. Well, you talked about, producing Steve and then Kenny Marks and then eventually working with Amy. Now, you kind of worked with Amy right as she was kind of doing what the industry was calling crossing over at that time. Was that the goal of your work with her, or was it just let's make the next album?
Well, for me, I was at Word for about 7 years, like I said, and I knew I was leaving, and this is kind of where BeBe and CeCe come into the picture. I knew I was leaving, so I was going to do the Instrumental Appetite. You'll see that BeBe Winans and Greg Gidley and Donna McElroy are featured vocalists on there. I put them on there especially so I could get them, particularly so I could get them a deal. And BeBe, actually, we got a deal at Sparrow because of that song, It's Only Natural. And from that, Amy and I had written a song, and I, basically just had the hook, Baby, Baby, and a few other lines throughout, and I played it for her, and she loved it. And so that became my first crossover, because I wanted to go make pop records. I just wanted a bigger platform, and that was her big crossover song. I had worked as a programmer and a keyboard player on her. What was the album before Baby Baby was the big one, the big Christian record that I can't remember the title of it now. But anyway, I had worked on that, and I developed that relationship with her. And so when she cut this song, this was like the ticket over to the pop world. And I had already, like I said, I'd worked with BeBe and CeCe. We got them signed to Sparrow Capital. And, and a lot of that work kind of brought in Vanessa Williams, because they heard, the stuff I'd done with them. So that's when I started kind of to move over toward pop music. And it's something that I really wanted to do, and something I was chasing. And I had a few Christian friends or a few Christian artists that thought I was selling out, just like they did for me.
Sure. Yeah.
But I just felt like I needed a bigger platform, and I'm so glad I did. I was throughout the 90s, I ended up signing to Sony, early 90s. That lasted, a decade, and had a great run there with Sony.
Well, you talked briefly about your dad being a hillbilly pastor, and he had a small group, and this is kind of where you got your seed in music, right? Because dad had his group, and but this is where you were introduced to your faith in Christ. I love hearing people's testimony about where was it that Jesus became your decision. This is my decision, not I'm singing in dad's group and he's a pastor and I better, show up on Sunday.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll start from the beginning. My dad was a hillbilly musician who got saved and became the music minister at our church, which was directly across the street.
Okay.
And so we were in church, every Sunday night, Wednesday, and especially through all the revivals and that sort of thing. And it was a bit of a primitive Baptist church too. There were feet washing and the whole bit, right? And I remember I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I got saved, and I And I remember going down, but I also remember, standing in church playing and singing. And my dad would put the guitar in a chair next to me because it was way bigger than I was. And I would stand and play and sing, And then when I turned 9, we made my first record, which was an EP. And I was a big fan of, you may have remember Steve Sanders back in the day.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a big fan of Steve Sanders. And so, we had 4 songs on that. And then again, when I was 13, we made another album. We made a full album at that point.
Okay.
But we traveled around the Southeast at different churches and venues and that sort of thing, and played and sang. And it's one of those things where I was raised in the church. I mean, literally, there was not a service that I didn't miss any, church services. And if
the door's open, you're there.
That's it. But I wouldn't trade that for anything. We were poor, so poor. We didn't have hot running water or an inside bathroom. And I tell that story all the time where you go out on the porch and draw well water.
Yeah.
You might get a snake or you might get a frog. You pull it up, you never know which one you're going to get. But I like I said, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
So where was it that, because I have a similar story. I'm MK, PK, born, raised, but there had to be a point where you said, okay, this relationship with Jesus is something that means something to me personally. Do you remember when that took place?
Yeah, I mean, I was a youngster. I mean, it was like I said, it was around 7 or 8 years old when I felt like this is something that really connected with me, and I gave my life to God, and I told, it's like from there on, that's all I've ever known. You know what I'm saying? Okay. It's like, so it became my life. It became my lifestyle, and to this day, throughout even my pop career, I've been in the executives' offices so many times, and they will swear and they'll look at me and they'll apologize. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And sometimes, it's like you just brush it off, but that's a level of respect that they have for me, and I appreciate that. The idea of growing up in a church, it has its good things and bad things. It's just like, I don't want to exclude anyone, but at the same time, look, I live my life. I look at my dad, I look at his life, and he was a prince. He really was. And he loved God, and he would give you the shirt off his back. And that's kind of what I've always, said I would do. It's who I want to be. I love my father, and I want to be more like him. And anyway, so all of this, he was just such a good man, and he lived it in front of me. You know?
So it sounds like your faith and your music were intertwined right from the beginning.
Completely.
And so it's no different than what you're doing now, and talking about the importance of faith. As you said, in the mainstream, there's still a place for it. And I was talking with Tommy Prophet a little while ago, and he was talking about the fact that, just like you, in a corporate boardroom, and somebody swears, or in a studio and somebody, so-and-so's here, we got to apologize. How have you seen your personal faith impact a mainstream society? Do you have examples? I mean, you don't have to name drop, but have you seen examples of where people say, oh, there's something to this Keith guy. What is it that he's got? And I need part of that.
Well, not so much directly like that, but I do know that there's a level of respect that I've had with many artists over the years. And I don't wear my religion on my sleeve, it's like, but I've had so many artists come through and just the appreciation that I feel from them, just being considerate to them. And I don't know, that's something I've always talked about. But it's like, I know that a lot of the people that I've worked with over the years have respected where I stand on all of this. And so, I just try to be the best person I can be and live what I know to be what God wants me to be doing. And I go, there's a part of me, I will tell you, that after having gone down the pop music road, I look back and I go, the thing that I loved most about the Christian music side of things is that I would get emails, or not emails, but I would get letters from people saying this song changed my life. I don't get that with the pop stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Even though I get a lot of people saying, oh, I love this song, it was, that sort of thing. But, having an impact on people's life is important to me, and I want to be able to do that. And Amy Grant and I were talking not long ago, and we both agreed, and we basically said the same thing. The next phase of our life is going to be different. It's not about having a hit. It's not about getting a Grammy. It's about making a difference.
Yeah.
And she is definitely making a difference. And I'm finding ways that I can plug in and do things for people. And I just want to give back. I want to be able to help anyone that I can and create something that is bigger than anything that I could ever imagine.
What I appreciate about what you said is, a lot of times I felt guilty because I'm not a go out and preach the gospel. I'm not a Billy Graham. I'm not an evangelist. And I've had a number of people tell me, yeah, but you've got a lifestyle that you live. It's called lifestyle evangelism. And for people around us to say, oh, I recognize that you're different, that says something about the way you're living and you're acting. And then to make this, we're both after 50, we're looking at what does life look like now? How do we change? And I was talking with our senior pastor a little bit ago, and he was saying, I'm beyond the accolades. You can tell me I'm great. Yeah, sure, it feels good. But that's not why I do this anymore. It's the whole, how do I invest in the people around me?
That's 100% it. Yeah, I'm working with a Canadian artist right now who I adore. She's been here from Canada for about 2 years. And she's just a sweetheart. But it's like, she has told me on many occasions, you're such a good man. Those words I love to hear. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And it's so it's just like treating people with respect and kindness and helping them find their voice in this, especially today with the industry. It's just a completely different music business, and you have to be a marketer, you have to be a singer, all these things, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's just good to be able to help people. And it's, like I said, it's a completely different business. So we're all in this together now, trying to figure this out.
Well, it's kind of interesting. You automatically morphed this way. My next question was, as a behind the scenes guy, you've seen a lot of changes in the music business, the music technology, the industry. I'm sure there's good and bad of that change.
Right.
What would you say is maybe your favorite thing about the way music industry, the music business, whatever you want to call it, has changed? And then let's talk about one of those things that you're going, man, it'd be nice to go back to yesteryear and do that again.
Right. Yeah. Well, to me, the first one is pretty easy. It's that technology has given people more opportunity. It's leveled the playing field a little bit, so that I'll give you an example. Back in the day, your mixing console would be $600,000 or more. Your tape machines, like the Sony 3348 that we did Save the Best for Last on, that was what, $80,000 or $180,000. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then we had the Synclavier for $125,000. It's like I was strapped because I was trying to compete, right? But now you can buy a Logic Pro for $200 and it kills the Synclavier, right? So this technology has opened the door for so many people, and to that end, you're seeing so many more artists come out and be able to do what they want to do. And I'm seeing some great talent, especially like I'm on TikTok a lot, and I just perused in there, seeing a lot of youngsters are actually beginning to play their instruments again, and I love seeing that. I know, right? That's it for me. It's like, and look, I love technology. I've always been on the front end of it. I'm fascinated with it, and I love putting things in front of me that I don't understand, figuring it out as part of the creative process. It's like I have a couple of different things in my programming room that make me think differently when I'm programming or when I'm creating. And so to that end, it's like, I like seeing these young kids actually begin to play real instruments, and that makes me happy. But the downside to all of that is that there's so many people doing it that it's hard to get traction, and there's so many other forms of entertainment now. The video side of things has become really dominant. And so if you don't have a video with what you're doing, it's not getting traction. And, it's just, like I said, it's so crowded out there. And so that's the downside if you have a downside to this.
So let's talk a little bit about if you're an up and coming artist. I mean, because you're going to get this question all the time in the circles that you run in, and you don't have the money, you don't have the equipment, but you've got some of these things that you can do. There's 1,000,001 people, like you said, out there doing the thing. How do you rise to the top in this crowded landscape? I mean, you have still some record labels that are spending some big bucks on the people that are the big flavor of the month.
Right.
But it seems like the YouTube stars, the TikTok stars how do you make that inroad to get people to say, oh, this is good music?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's all about work ethic. I mean,
Okay.
when you look at TikTok, and this is a known factor that if you're not doing 3 videos a day, you're not really hitting the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain other things that play into that as well. But to do 3 TikToks a day takes a lot of effort,
Yeah.
you know. And so, and then just learning to play your instrument and learning to write, all those things take so much time. And that's the line for me. I see a lot of the artists, and I've had a few of them that don't do the work. They, for some reason, it's just not. I mean, for me, growing up, I would play piano literally, and this is no exaggeration, 8 hours a day. And I tell this story a lot, is that my mom would bring a plate of fried chicken and lay it on top of the piano and walk out. But that's how committed I was. And it wasn't even that I was committed. I couldn't help myself. It was just, I had to be playing. I had a drum set, I had a bass, I had a steel guitar, I had a 4-track TAC player, and I had my piano.
Yeah.
So I was making music all the time.
Yeah.
And I did that. You know, I didn't really start playing piano until I was 16 years old. So all that became, you know, I was like playing guitar and bass and all that stuff early on, but it's like the music, I was obsessed with it and I had to be doing it. And so when I see a younger person now that's obsessed like that, I pay attention, because typically it's the hours that you put in. To me, that's what's important, you know, because that will yield success down the road if you're consistent with that. And so I look at that as an important factor.
Out here in Oregon, we're struggling. I think all the way across the country, we're struggling finding people who will stick with a job.
Right.
And you know, your restaurants are not open long hours, not because of the pandemic, but because they can't find help. Right. And that gets back to what you were saying, that work ethic. We've kind of lost that as a society of saying, I'm going to put my nose down, put my nose to the grindstone and work and be better and learn and be a productive member. It's all about, I got to make it about me and not about how we plug into other people. Right. And I think that for me, that's the biggest downfall, except for maybe the fact that music is programmed instead of played. Right. But to me, that's one of the biggest downfalls, is we've lost that connection, because now it's all, I just got to focus on how am I going to make my TikTok video, instead of rather saying, how do we build a community? Because there's strength in that community. Yeah. Right. I mean, right. why is it that we always had producers and engineers and all these people who had specialties, who spent all their time producing, spent all their time. Now we've got a guy who's playing the guitar, singing, dancing, marketing, you know, all of that at the same time. How can he be an expert at any of those? Well, they can't. And that's the problem. And I think, you know, it shows, and I'm not being critical of anyone, but, you know, I know just even myself, if I want to do something and I want to do it great, then it's going to take time. Yeah. You know, it's just still that's the way it works. But, you know, I think we've entered into a situation too, where the video, there's such a need to be a star. There's such a need to be seen and heard. And then that goes all the way down the line to people ridiculing people online, or doing things online that they know they can get away with because they're online, you know, and it's just being mean. And I don't know, it's just like, we've entered in a whole new realm that I've never experienced in my lifetime. You know, I just go, people usually don't say those things to other people, especially if you're in front of them. You won't say that to their face, but you do it online. All that to say is that I'm not on social media a lot for a reason. And that's why I just go, it stresses me out. And so I think a lot of these artists would do themselves a favor if they just got quiet and went off and learned to do something great, like play guitar or piano or write a song, and then come back into the marketplace. You know, but there's that narcissist kind of need to be seen and heard, you know, and I just don't have that, you know, I don't really care. So do you think that I mean, you're working with the music of tomorrow with a lot of these people that you're working with, and you mentioned earlier that there's a kind of a trend back to people playing real instruments again. And I'm saying, thank you. But do you think that we have people who are starting to learn that the art of music is more important than the number of people listening? I work with a few artists that are both ways, actually. I've got a couple of artists that are dead set on learning to play their instrument and wanting to write great songs, and a couple of others they just
it's all about getting their video online tomorrow,
Yeah.
and it's like, and look, that's part of the culture, it's like, I don't know, but it's like, it's hard to say. I'm old school that way, is that, if I'm going to play piano, I want to play it better than anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to know my instrument inside and out. If I buy a new piece of gear, I want to know what that thing does so that I can get the most out of it. And so, but I'm still, I'm still chasing, whatever's new as well. But, and that's, when we talk about the new music, it's like, it's so like, I don't know, you remember the Genie organ back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we are. I mean, I can sit down at the keyboard right now, and I've thought about doing a parody on this where I'm actually playing one finger and I've got a whole track playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that, it's gotten down to that. So that's called drag and drop. You just drag it to the timeline, and then you have a record, and that's nothing, I guess there's nothing wrong with that, except that, and I was online not long ago, and I watched this YouTube tutorial, and this kid was showing you how to play this pop song that was popular. And he was playing the bass, and I was watching his hands, and he's actually playing the wrong notes. And so I'm like going, it's like, that's one of my beefs, is doing tutorials when you're not sure about what you're doing, and so that's kind of it's part of our whole culture these days. It's like getting on there before you're ready.
And then the difficulty comes when, people who are really truly making art for the sake of art, well, they can't afford to make a living at it anymore. So how do you sustain that? It has to be something that's from your heart, that art from the heart. Maybe there's somebody said there's something there, but because that's got to be the only reason that you're doing it, because you're not getting paid for it anymore unless you've got those eyeballs.
That's, to me, that's where you have a real artist, when they will do it for free, because they can't do anything else. They just love music so much. So that's an important statement. You just said that, because it's like there's not a ton of money in the music business anymore.
Right.
So you can't do it for the money until you get to billions of streams, and then at that point you're a major label's probably involved at some point.
Yeah. Well, so then herein lies the dilemma, I would imagine. Here's somebody like yourself who has made a career of helping people craft themselves, make themselves into the best that they can be, right?
Right.
Well, you have to make a living.
Yeah.
And if the real true artists don't have the finances to do it, and they can't afford to hire a Keith Thomas to produce the album, that doesn't seem like it's a fair thing. I mean, where do we go?
It's not.
That seems like a dilemma.
It is a major dilemma, and that has everything to do with the business model that's out there right now. When you're talking about streaming, there's very little money until you get really into millions of streams.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and to get that, it's like, you better have a team of people behind you. And so it's messed up in that regard. So that my encouragement for a young artist or emerging artist is to, you just got to do what you love and find a way to get your message out. Obviously TikTok is the discovery platform right now. It might be something different next year.
Right.
But, but that's where people are getting signed. They're going straight to Spotify from there. I saw a kid on there last week that I've been following literally for 6 months or a year, that he had a niche. Basically, he would take these pop songs and he would say, what if this were R&B? And he would then do his version of that song.
Yeah.
And they were always great. And then a couple of weeks back, I guess it was, he said, thank you guys for blowing this up. I got signed to Warner Brothers. And so it's like, cool. Those are the kind of things that I love. I love seeing what happen for people.
Well, I promoted concerts for a lot of years. I wouldn't want to be a concert promoter anymore, because, there's just no way for me to pay my bills, let alone pay you enough to even buy the ticket to come out, Right. And so music acquisition as a fan has become easier in a way that it's all out there, but where do you find the good stuff and not just the copy and paste stuff?
Right.
So,
the curators are important, but I don't know. I don't know where it all ends or where it goes from here, other than, you've got, Spotify, which is a mess right now with all the Joe Rogan stuff. So who knows what's going to happen there? Yeah. Apple said today they have 800 million users. So, who knows?
Yeah.
I don't really know. You just keep going and going, because like you said, at some point you've got to have the ability to pay producers and engineers and studios and that sort of thing to be able to do it professionally. But it's at the same time, that's why I think you see so many artists out there, younger artists, that don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And it just sounds like poorly produced. It's just,
yeah.
I don't know the way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not their fault. They, it's look, and I have found seriously the artists that come to me that usually are the most talented are the ones that don't have the funds. It's just for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, one of the things before we do every podcast, one of the things you said in our pre-interview was that you're trying to future focus is more on how I have a meaningful impact on other lives today, both personally and creatively. And I'm sure that's weighing into this. How do I say yes to the right things to pay my bills, but how do I say yes to help mold that new career or mold that new album? What does that look like for you? I mean, like you said, you have a hard time saying no.
Yeah.
You have to say no, because I'm sure somebody of your stature is probably getting enough offers to do work to keep you busy until the cows come home. So how do you balance that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that, the thing is the budgets that we used to have are completely different now.
Yeah.
There were 6-figure budgets back in the day per song. Now they are maybe $5,000 to $10,000, maybe 25 if you've got a major label involved. But for me, I started looking years ago when everything started going to video. I bought cameras and lights because I've been shooting photography since high school.
Okay.
So it was part of another extension of what I do. So I started being able to get involved in the media side of things, which is good. I'm glad I did. But I just have this passion for VR, and I think VR has its good and bad sides, is like everything else. But the thing that excites me about virtual reality is that I look at the potential for education. I look at the potential for medical, and obviously entertainment's a no-brainer there. But when you talk about the medical side, I know Disney mapped all their parks in VR. Imagine a kid sitting in the hospital but can't go, and you put the headset on and you're literally experiencing what the other kids there experience. That to me is thrilling. And
that's
so
cool.
we have started a new company that is diving into the VR side of things.
Okay.
And part of that mission is to be able to do some of that stuff. And I'm excited about that. I have been working with Facebook, and I've gone to India 2 times working with new artists over there. And so I've carried my cameras with me, over there. And I've just, I have this goal. I want to do this show that I get to go India, Japan, Africa, wherever, and find artists that the labels would never give a shot, and you develop that artist and you show the development part of that. And that's what I did in India with some of these artists there. I've got footage of us in the studio together and how it started and how it came out and all that stuff. And it's fascinating. I think there's an interest there,
Yeah.
So, and then, you're giving opportunities to these people that literally can't afford, like we talked about, can't afford the gear, and so I love that part of it.
So you had mentioned just real briefly before we pushed record that you'd been to India, and you talked about this. I've been very fascinated, especially in the worship industry, and I hate calling it a worship industry, but the fact that we have these songs that you go overseas and everybody's singing a Chris Tomlin song or whatever. But I've traveled enough times to hear people singing their own songs in their own tongue, and the passion behind those songs is even greater. And so I would imagine as you've traveled and you see people doing the music in their style, in their way, how exciting that must be to find that gem that, like you said, nobody would discover.
Right. Yeah. Our first trip, we auditioned maybe 8 to 10 artists.
Okay.
And from that, we kind of picked 4 from there.
Yeah.
But the idea was we created tracks here initially just to get kind of like a jumping off point. We carried tracks over, and what we were doing for Facebook was more lifestyle. It was like you might have this hook, and then the rest of it might be instrumental. But we would sit in the control room with our English hook, and then they would translate it.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how that. And then we would get in the studio and record them singing, and it's just fascinating. And then when a gentleman there that we were working with put me on the back of his motorcycle with my camera, and I'm riding all over India, Calcutta with my camera, shooting in different places that man, I'm just fascinated by the culture. You know,
Yeah.
I love these people. I love these people. The second trip, the day I left on the second trip, two guys got on their knees and kissed my feet. You know, and that's the
Oh,
ultimate respect. You
yeah.
know, and I'm just like we were all in tears. You know, and I still on a regular basis connect with these guys over there. They'll text me and I'll text them back, and it's just we've developed this relationship. So, you know, I wouldn't trade that for anything. You know.
So is this a product that people can see on Facebook now? Is it something that's out there right now, or is it in development still, or what?
Well, it's part of their music library. If you go to
Okay.
Instagram or Facebook and say you need a cat video you have a cat video that needs music, you
Right.
can, and that's part of the library that we've been building there.
Okay. So is that the same? I noticed Charlie Peacock right now, and he's releasing, it seems like a song a day. He's prolific, but on the Facebook label, so to speak, I use air quotes. Is that the same kind
Right.
of a thing?
Yep.
Okay.
He's part of that whole program. Absolutely.
That's
Yes.
so very cool.
It's fun.
Well, you may have just touched on it, but one of the things I love to hear from people is as you look back over your career and you find that moment, I call it a pinch me moment, where you're going, oh my goodness, I can't believe I got to do fill in the blank. And it can either be professionally or personally or whatever. Is there something that if you had to look back over your past, let's just say 40 years, we won't say how old you are, what is it that stands out to you that you go, oh my gosh, God, you gave me an opportunity that I can't believe, and I still pinch myself when I think about it.
Oh boy. I honestly, Dave, I've had so many that I would have to sum it up by just going, I have to look at the whole career, the fact that I got to do this and be involved with so many great people.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I keep repeating myself, but when you're as far into the career as I am, you know, I've been doing this 35 years. You realize at some point that it's not about the Grammy or the hit or whatever. It's
Mm-hmm.
about the relationships, the people. And I have some incredible friends and relationships. They're solid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I know these people love me and I love them. And that's the most important thing because, you know, the music business is up and down. You go through hard times and I've been through my share, and you know who your friends are.
Yeah.
And I do. And so that's, to me, that's what I would say, that I got to do this. And I'm in the music business, which is hard in itself. But when you have a support group, or you have people that you feel like you can trust and that you feel like they've got your back,
Yeah.
you know, that's important.
So you mentioned the fact that the Grammy doesn't matter anymore. The award doesn't matter. Where was it in your thought process that you realized that it's the relationship over the reward?
You know, it might have happened kind of a gradual thing where you look at your body of work at some point and you go, wow, I've made so much music, I can't even tell you. And you look back over it, and then you start looking at the list of the people that you've been in the studio with, and you realize, you know, I've got a lot of friends, I've got a lot of relationships, you know. So I think it's probably more of a gradual thing. I don't think it's anything one day I woke up and go, I don't care about the Grammys anymore. You know, look, everybody likes to be awarded, but that's not why I do it. It's really not. I mean, because I could go chase that top 40 thing again right now. And it's funny because back in the day, I would do a track and people would say, wow, your music sounds much older than you are. And now they're saying, oh, your music sounds much younger than you are. So, you know, I could go chase that top 40 thing, but that doesn't motivate me like that anymore, you know?
I think that gets back to the heart of the art, or the art of the heart, whichever way we want to say it. And
Sure.
where, you know, if it happens to bring an award, if it happens to bring notoriety or whatever, that's a nice frosting on the cake. But the real meat of the thing is, what is the art and how is it impacting your community?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit. We're going to flash forward 40 years and somebody's writing your autobiography. What do you hope they say about your career as Keith Thomas, musician, producer, composer, friend, whatever? What do you hope it is that they say, this is who Keith is?
Oh, but he was a good man, that he made music that impacted the world, you know, that changed lives, and that not only entertained, but it meant something, you know. That's the thing. And I think I know from the beginning that was incredibly important, you know, because of the message, obviously. But you know, as I got into the pop side of things, I definitely had my limitations on what I would say in a song. And And thank God, my contribution most of the time was musical. It's like I'm a melody guy, so I didn't get into the lyric side of things too much. Even though I wrote with the artist in the room,
Sure,
the lyrics, and
sure,
stuff.
sure.
But all that to say is that I would just hope that they would look at the music and it made a difference in their life, and that it was at a level that was appreciated. Because I've worked hard on that end. I've spent the time and the energy into doing stuff that I wanted to last. I mean, to me, when I started making records, my thing was I didn't want to make such trendy music that it would be gone. I wanted it to last. And so, and some of the things I listen to now, I look back on, and some of the BeBe and CeCe Winans stuff, it really holds up.
Yeah.
The Amy Grant stuff. We just had, last year was the 30th anniversary of BeBe, and so we went back and revisited some of that stuff. And I actually got the masters back and had the multi-tracks and was weeding through that. And there were things on there I'm going, wow, where did that come from? I didn't even know this was on this song or whatever, So I just go, I want to make a difference. I want people to know my heart, and that I would give you the shirt off my back if I could. I just want to help people. I want to be a blessing.
Well, one of the things I do every Saturday, we have a group of folks who've committed to praying for people who have and are making music. How can we specifically be praying for you in the weeks and the months that are in front of us?
I appreciate that. Well, I am working on some new ventures and ways that we can develop a new platform that may be able to help other artists, emerging artists, get their message out there. And so that's, to me, the biggest thing for me. That's what I'm facing, trying to figure out how to get the funding for all of that, because it's expensive. VR is incredibly expensive. And so at that point, that's what I would say. Just pray for the means to be able to do this in a different way.
I sure appreciate Keith's energy and enthusiasm. You can tell that helping people be the best they can be is an important part of who he is. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. Are my interactions with other people helping them improve? Are the words that I speak building them up? Do the events on my calendar reflect my priority to be involved in other people? So often for me, it is easy to get entrenched in the day-to-day routines that I miss the opportunities to make space for helping someone out. Or heck, even worse, I miss the chance to just hang out and be a friend. Typically, I want my meetings to have a productive agenda where I can tick off a few to-dos and not worry about anything else. But I wonder what it would look like if I set my personal plans aside and focused on investing in the people around me, not making myself better, but helping other people. I'm going to have to think and pray about that one this week, and that's going to be what I encourage you to do as well. As always, thank you for joining me for this conversation today on the Christian Music Archive podcast. I am grateful that we get to spend this time together each week hearing stories of God's amazing faithfulness. As a regular listener to this podcast, would you be willing to rate us on your favorite podcast app? A 5-star rating or a review really helps us spread the word about this show. Next week, I'm talking with John Cooper from Skillet, and you definitely do not want to miss this conversation. So be sure to join me every week when I share stories of the people you'll find on the pages of the Christian Music Archive. To close things out today, I want to remind you this: God loves you. In fact, He's crazy about you.
It's time for another Mischievous Maurer's Miscellaneous Misquotes.
To the guy who invented the zero, thanks for nothing.